So imagine you're a teenager, right? And you are just struggling through this required class.
Oh, yeah, we have definitely all been there.
Right. And you finally take the final exam, and you just know you completely bombed it.
The worst feeling.
Exactly. So you wait a few days, you finally get that report card, and you're just bracing yourself for the inevitable F. Because we all know what an F feels like, you know. It's like a dead end.
Yeah, the door just slammed shut on you.
It really does. But at one particular high school in Chicago, they actually completely threw out that traditional grading rule book.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, so if a student doesn't pass the required units to graduate, they don't see a failing grade on their paper. Instead, they get the grade, not yet.
I mean, the linguistic power of that is just phenomenal.
It really changes everything, doesn't it?
It does, because not yet fundamentally changes the temporal reality of a failure. Like an F tells you that your current state is your permanent state. You've hit a wall,
Right.
But not yet gives you a trajectory. It places you on a learning curve, pointing directly into the future, and it basically suggests that the story simply hasn't finished playing out.
And that subtle shift in storytelling is exactly the core of our deep dive today. We are taking a really comprehensive look at how you view your own intelligence, your raw abilities, and crucially, how your physical body processes the stress of failing.
Which is a huge piece of the puzzle.
It is. So we're pulling from the foundational research of Stanford's Dr. Carol Dweck, analyzing some really fascinating real-time brain scans, and looking at the physiological reality of what learning actually does to your blood flow.
Yeah, so the overarching mission here for this deep dive is to explore the biological and psychological chasm between two distinct operating systems, right? A fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Right, which are terms people might have heard, but we're going deep today.
Exactly. We want to look at the actual mechanics of how shifting a few internal narratives can literally rewire your neural pathways and build a brain that actively seeks out friction.
So to understand those mechanics, I think we first have to see how these operating systems dictate behavior in just everyday mundane situations.
Yeah, that's the best place to start.
So the research gives us two theoretical adults to look at. We'll call them Jay and Ann. So Jay operates entirely on a fixed mindset.
Right, meaning he believes intelligence, athleticism, talent, all of that, they're just finite traits.
Like a set budget you're given at birth.
Exactly. You are handed a certain amount, and that is your lot in life. But Anne operates on a growth mindset, meaning she views those exact same traits as muscles that can be developed through, well, deliberate friction.
And you really see the divergence in the smallest choices they make. Like, take something as simple as encountering a physical challenge.
Right. Oh, this is a great example.
So let's say there's an impromptu physical activity, maybe a team-building exercise at work that involves jumping or coordination. Jay will actively avoid it.
Yeah, he's taking the elevator instead of the stairs just to avoid getting winded in front of people.
Exactly. And if he tries to pick up the guitar as a hobby and struggles with the first few chords, he just abandons it. His entire life is structured around the fear of mockery.
Because looking foolish is an actual threat to him. In his mind, looking foolish proves he lacks natural ability.
Right. But Anne's approach to the exact same environment is completely inverted.
She's skipping the elevator.
She is. She skips the elevator. She jumps up the stairs, counting the steps just to feel the physical exertion in her body. She decides to learn the drums and practices for 15 minutes every single morning.
And not because banging on drums at 7 a.m. is effortlessly fun.
Right. I mean, I would hate that.
Me too.
Right.
But she does it because she views that awkward, clunky effort as a necessary down payment on a more capable future self. Like, she expects to be bad at it, so failing a drum fill isn't an indictment of her character.
In this daily divergence, it's actually the adult manifestation of a really pivotal study conducted by Dr. Carol Dweck that kind of mapped this whole psychological landscape.
Yeah, this is the classic study. She brought 10-year-old children into her room and intentionally gave them puzzles that were just far too difficult for their age group.
Which sounds a little cruel, but the results are amazing.
They are. The children who lean toward a growth mindset, you know, the young Anns of the study, they reacted in a way that shocked the researchers.
They actually liked it, right?
They were genuinely delighted by the friction. They would pull their chairs closer to the table and say things like, "I love a challenge," or "I was hoping this would be informative."
Okay, a 10-year-old saying they hope a puzzle is informative is just wild to me.
It is pretty funny.
Like, most adults don't even have that level of emotional regulation when they get a password wrong on their computer.
I know I don't.
Oh, I definitely don't.
Yeah.
But it highlights how unnatural the fixed mindset actually is, you know?
Mhm.
For the kids who operated like Jay, the fixed mindset group, the difficult puzzle was a complete tragedy.
Because they believed their intelligence was a static number.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So failing the puzzle meant their core value was being downgraded in real time. They were gripped by what Dweck beautifully termed the tyranny of now.
The tyranny of now, I love that phrase.
It's so accurate. If they couldn't solve it right now, they felt inherently defective.
So the tyranny of now versus the power of yet, and how those fixed mindset kids coped with that tyranny is actually kind of terrifying.
Yeah, it gets a little dark.
It does. Because when they couldn't solve the puzzle, they didn't ask for a tutor or say they would study more. They told the researchers they would probably just cheat next time.
Wow.
Or even sadder, they actively sought out other children who did worse than them just to artificially inflate their own shattered self-esteem.
I mean, when your entire identity is a static label, any struggle is an existential threat. Like, if you are labeled the smart kid and you encounter a problem you can't solve, the label's at risk of being revoked. This is entirely why modern corporate recruiters are actually changing how they interview candidates. They were screening out the tyranny of now by asking questions like, do you believe great managers are born or are they trained?
That's a trick question, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. If a candidate says they are born, it is a massive red flag. It signals an employee who will hide their mistakes rather than learn from them, because admitting a mistake means admitting they lack the born talent.
You know, hearing you describe that, it really makes me think of the architecture of video games.
Oh, how so?
Well, the growth mindset, that whole not yet philosophy, it's the exact same psychology as a video game checkpoint.
Okay, I'm cracking with you.
Like, when you are playing a really difficult game and your character dies fighting a massive boss, you don't throw the controller and say, well, I am permanently a failure at this game and my life is over.
Well, maybe some people do.
Fair, fair. But generally, you realize you just haven't figured out the boss's attack pattern yet. You respawn, you try dodging left instead of right, and you iterate. You totally separate your personal identity from the failure of the character on the screen.
And that separation is the key to resilience. The
Yeah.
failure is happening to the strategy, not to the person.
Exactly.
But the obvious dilemma here is, if the video game checkpoint mentality is so much more effective and resilient, why is the fixed mindset so incredibly pervasive?
Right. How do we systematically dismantle the growth mindset in ourselves and the people around us?
Well, the answer in the research points to something most people assume is universally good.
Praise.
Praise, the way we compliment each other, is often quietly toxic.
Which is such a counterintuitive idea.
Yeah.
But the landmark 1998 study by Dweck and Mueller breaks this down perfectly.
Yeah, this study is a game changer.
They took over 100 children, brought them into a room, and had them solve a set of relatively easy problems. And every child succeeded. Then, they split the children into two groups and delivered two very different types of praise.
Right, so one group received what the researchers categorize as intelligence praise. The adults gave them a static identity label saying, you got a really high score, you must be so smart at this.
And the second group?
The second group received effort praise. So the adults focused entirely on the verb, saying, you got a really high score, you must have tried really hard.
So one group gets a label, the other group gets a verb.
Exactly. And then the researchers offered the kids a choice for their next task. They could either take a safe, easy test or a challenging test where they would learn a lot but probably make mistakes.
And the kids who were praised for being smart overwhelmingly chose the easy test, right?
They did. They were handed this shiny new smart label, and they absolutely refused to do anything that might jeopardize it.
But the kids praised for their effort leaned into the friction.
They chose the harder test because the adults had just signaled that the effort itself was what held value.
And the physiological and psychological collapse of those smart kids in the third phase of the study is just astounding.
It really is, because the researchers forced all the kids to take a highly difficult test next. Everyone struggled.
Naturally.
But for the kids praised for intelligence, the struggle broke them. Their confidence plummeted, their enjoyment vanished. And when they were finally given a third easy test, just like the first one, they completely aced. Their scores actually dropped.
Wait, they did worse on the easy test the second time around.
Yes. Their cognitive capacity was essentially hijacked by the stress of losing their identity.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the kids praised for effort maintained their confidence through the difficult test, and when given that final easy test, their scores increased significantly.
And the downstream effect of that identity praise It actually turns people into liars, which I found
Or
fascinating.
the reporting phase of the study, yes.
Right, at the very end of the experiment, the researchers asked the kids to write down their scores to share with students at another school. The effort-praised kids honestly reported their struggles.
But the smart kids.
A massive percentage of the kids praised for being smart, actively lied, and inflated their scores.
They had to misrepresent reality to protect the ego construct they were handed. It just proves how incredibly fragile a static identity truly is.
It makes identity praise sound like building this towering house of cards. You tell someone they're a genius, you build this beautiful, intricate structure. But one slight breeze of failure, one bad grade, and the entire identity collapses into a mess on the table.
That's a great visual.
Whereas effort praise feels more modular. It is like building with Lego. If the structure breaks apart, you aren't devastated because you still hold the individual blocks. You know, the verbs, the persistence, the strategy, you just rebuild it.
Exactly. You still have the tools.
But I do find myself wondering about the practical application of this. Does this mean we should ban the phrase good job? Are we never allowed to tell a colleague or a child that they are talented?
Well, no. Banning compliments isn't the goal. The nuance is in what you are choosing to anchor the compliment to.
Okay, explain that.
You have to be meticulous about separating performance from innate identity. When someone achieves something great, you focus the spotlight on the mechanics of their success.
So instead of saying you are a natural genius,
You say, the strategy you used to organize that project was brilliant, or your focus during that difficult phase was incredible.
I see.
You reinforce the variables they can actually control. No one can control their innate genetics on a Tuesday morning, but they can always control their focus and their strategy.
I love that. But if that house of cards does collapse, I want to look at what is physically happening under the hood. When someone with a fixed mindset fails, what is the biological reflex in that exact split second?
Oh, the ERP study. This is where it gets incredibly precise.
Right, the sources provided this event-related potential study that visualizes this perfectly.
The methodology is fascinating. So subjects were fitted with electrode caps, which is essentially a snug hat wired with sensors.
That's a bit like a wired swimming cap.
Yeah, exactly. And it allows researchers to monitor their neural activity in real time with millisecond precision. So they were asked extremely difficult trivia questions and were required to state how confident they were in their answer. Then the screen would reveal whether they were right or wrong.
And the researchers were hunting for a specific electrical signal called the P3 wave, right?
Yes, the P3 wave is a burst of neural activity that happens the absolute instant the brain receives negative feedback. It is the brain's internal alarm bell saying, error detected.
And where that alarm bell rings in the brain dictates your entire reality.
Completely. For the subjects who operated with a fixed mindset, the P3 wave spiked heavily in the rostral and anterior regions of the anterior cingulate cortex, or the ACC.
Okay, I need to break down the geography there. What is the function of the rostral and anterior ACC?
Good question. Those regions are heavily involved in processing somatic and emotional responses. It is the threat detection center.
Okay, so it's all about feelings.
Right. So when the fixed mindset individuals saw they got the answer wrong, their brain simply processed the emotional sting of the failure. They felt the shame, the embarrassment, the drop in status.
And what else was happening in their brain?
Nothing. The scans revealed a complete void of activity anywhere else. Their brain was so consumed by the emotional pain that it deployed zero resources toward actually learning the correct answer.
Well, they were just bathing in the embarrassment.
Exactly.
But the neural geography for the growth mindset group was completely different.
A total shift. The P3 signal in the growth mindset subjects fired in the dorsal region of the ACC.
And what does the dorsal region do?
The dorsal ACC is responsible for cognitive appraisal and executive control. As Dr. Dweck observed, their brains were basically on fire with it.
So they weren't just feeling bad about it.
No, they certainly registered the error, but instead of wallowing in the emotional threat, their neural pathways immediately diverted attention to analyze the mechanics of the mistake. They were actively scanning to figure out why they were wrong so they could capture the new information.
Okay, I hear that, but I am struggling to buy the idea that someone can just cleanly flip a switch and bypass embarrassment.
Oh, sure.
Like if I am standing in front of a room of my peers feeling 99% confident about a presentation and someone points out a massive glaring error, I'm going to feel my stomach drop. I can't just command my brain to ignore the shame and solely engage the dorsal ACC.
Well, you can't, and the neuroscience doesn't suggest you stop feeling the emotion. The fixed mindset reflex affects every single human being.
Okay, that's a relief.
Right. The difference lies in parallel processing. The goal isn't the suppression of the emotional sting, it is the conscious deployment of parallel cognitive resources.
So you feel both at once.
Exactly. You feel the embarrassment in the anterior ACC, but you train yourself to simultaneously force your attention toward the dorsal cognitive puzzle. You acknowledge the pain, but you ask, what is the structural flaw in my presentation?
So it's a habit you build.
Yes. Over time, actively prioritizing the puzzle over the pain builds thicker neural pathways that actually naturally dampen the severity of the emotional hijacking.
But if we are deploying parallel cognitive resources in the middle of a failure, that takes a tremendous amount of biological energy. And usually when I am failing, my body is flooded with physical stress. My heart is racing, my palms are sweating.
Typical fight or flight.
Exactly. And that physical panic feels incredibly counterproductive to a calm cognitive learning state.
And that physiological panic is the next crucial piece of the puzzle. We are culturally conditioned to interpret a racing heart and sweaty palms as signs of impending doom.
Right.
But Dr. Aaliyah Crumb's research on the stresses-enhancing mindset completely upends that assumption. Most people operate on the belief that stress inevitably diminishes performance and damages the body.
Which seems logical.
But Dr. Crum demonstrated that simply teaching people about the enhancing properties of stress alters their actual cardiovascular reality.
The mechanism of that blew my mind.
Yeah.
Merely believing that stress is a useful tool actually tells your heart to behave differently.
It changes the vascular mechanics. When individuals believe stress is a mobilization tool, their stroke volume increases. Their heart physically pumps a larger volume of blood with every single beat.
That's incredible.
And simultaneously, they experience peripheral vasodilation, meaning the blood vessels in their extremities open up, allowing that increased blood flow to reach the brain and muscles efficiently.
So the stress response becomes, what's the word, anabolic?
Yes, anabolic. It regulates cortisol and optimizes hormones to sharpen focus and facilitate growth. But when you believe stress is toxic, your blood vessels constrict. Your heart pumps harder against narrower pipes, which is what actually causes the biological damage.
So it is the exact same chemical cocktail of adrenaline and cortisol, but the narrative you tell yourself determines whether it acts as a toxic acid or high-octane fuel.
Precisely.
And this synergy brings us to a massive study published in the journal Nature by Dr. David Yeager. He investigated what happens when you combine Dweck's growth mindset with Crumb's stresses-enhancing mindset.
He termed it a synergistic mindset, acting as a super buffer against anxiety.
And the testing ground for this was the Trier social stress test.
Which is just brutal.
It sounds like an absolute psychological nightmare.
It is meticulously designed to be the most uncomfortable experience possible.
Yeah.
Participants are brought into a room and forced to give an impromptu speech, followed by complex mental arithmetic on a whiteboard.
Already sounds awful.
But wait, it's all in front of a panel of judges, and the judges are strictly instructed to provide zero positive, nonverbal feedback.
No nodding, no smiling.
Nothing. They just sit there with crossed arms frowning at you while you stumble through math problems. It reliably induces massive spikes in cortisol and anxiety.
I'm sweating just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But the intervention the researchers used to combat this nightmare was surprisingly brief, right?
Extremely brief.
They didn't put the students through months of therapy. They gave them a single 30-minute self-administered tutorial.
Right.
And this tutorial simply explained the mechanics of the growth mindset and explicitly taught them that the physical sensations of stress, the pounding chest, the shallow breath, they are not signs of failure.
Exactly. They are biological proof that the body is mobilizing resources to help them succeed.
And that one 30-minute shift in narrative resulted in a 40% improvement in the students' self-regard during the stress test.
And it translated to a 14% increase in their pass rates for incredibly difficult STEM courses later in the semester.
Just from 30 minutes. But I do need to draw a hard line here regarding stress.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I'm working an 80-hour week, sleeping 3 hours a night, and my boss is constantly screaming at me, no amount of positive storytelling is going to stop my body from breaking down. We can't mindset our way out of cellular damage.
Absolutely not. That distinction is paramount, and the scientific literature is very careful to separate the two.
So what's the difference?
The synergistic mindset applies to acute adaptive learning stress. The friction of mastering a difficult subject, navigating a tough conversation, or taking a high-stakes exam, that acute stress is highly malleable and can be harnessed for focus.
And the 80-hour work week.
That is chronic stress. The relentless, sleep-depriving environment where your cortisol never returns to baseline and you have zero recovery time, that is universally destructive. The objective is never to tolerate toxic environments. The objective is to stop misinterpreting the acute friction of learning as a biological threat.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. So, knowing the neuroscience of the ACC and the cardiovascular mechanics of stress, the question shifts to application.
How do we use this?
Right. How do we actively rewire these narratives? How do we prove to our stubborn brains that nurture and effort actually override genetic starting lines?
Well, the empirical evidence is everywhere once you stop looking for innate genius. The sources detail a fascinating twin study where twins were separated.
Ah, the classic nature versus nurture setup.
Exactly. The twin adopted into a household with highly educated parents, who presumably fostered a richer learning environment, developed a significantly higher intelligence level than the twin raised by the biological parents.
So the genetic code was identical, but the environment dictated the cognitive output?
Exactly.
And the classroom examples are even more striking. Like, there was a teacher who took over a kindergarten class in Harlem where, for the first month, the children couldn't even hold pencils and were throwing daily tantrums.
Right.
She completely steeped the room in a growth mindset culture. By the end of that single academic year, those same children were scoring in the 95th percentile on national achievement tests.
Which is just staggering.
And then there's the school on a Native American reservation in Washington state. They were historically at the bottom of their district's rankings. They integrated growth mindset principles, and within 18 months, those students were outscoring the affluent kids in Seattle.
The children of Microsoft engineers.
Yes.
It just shows that when you remove the threat of static identity, difficulty ceases to mean I am inherently dumb and simply means not yet.
So how do we practically install this in our own lives?
You start by auditing your praise. Reward the verbs. Compliment the strategy, the persistence, and the focus of the people around you, rather than throwing labels at them.
Okay, audit praise. What else?
Secondly, actively solicit post-mortem analysis on your failures. The highest performers don't just endure the P3 error wave in their brain. They invite colleagues to help them dissect the mistake to ensure the dorsal ACC captures the lesson.
Oh, I'm definitely stealing the brain point strategy mentioned in the Stanford alumni research for that.
Yes, the math game.
Right. Game scientists developed a math program that entirely changed the reward structure. Instead of just giving points for a fast, correct answer, the game rewarded the learning curve.
It issued points for effort, for pausing to review a hint, and for attempting a brand new strategy, even if that strategy resulted in a wrong answer.
And applying that to adult life means consciously rewarding yourself for the friction of the process, not just the final output.
Another highly effective integration tool is teaching the concept. Sit down and write a letter to a friend, a child, or even a hypothetical person struggling with a challenge, detailing exactly how the growth mindset and the stresses-enhancing physiology work.
Because teaching it cements it.
Exactly. The cognitive act of translating the science and teaching it to someone else firmly cements the new neural pathways in your own brain.
But there is one massive cultural trap we have to dismantle before we wrap up. We constantly hear the motivational phrase, the mind is like a muscle. You just have to exercise it.
Oh, I hate that analogy.
Why is that analogy actually setting us up for failure?
Because it creates a false expectation of the feedback loop. Think about it. When you go to the gym and perform a bicep curl, your muscle immediately fills with blood. You get a pump.
Right, you look bigger immediately.
The muscle physically looks bigger, and endorphins make you feel fantastic while you are doing the hard work. The gratification is instant. But cognitive strain doesn't feel like that at all.
No, it really doesn't.
When you are grappling with a complex new software system or a difficult language, your brain doesn't feel powerful. It feels awful. You feel agitated, exhausted, and confused.
So if learning were truly like lifting weights, it would be like doing a heavy squat, watching your legs instantly shrink and hurt, feeling profoundly weak for 3 weeks, and only then waking up one morning to find them stronger.
Exactly. The brain doesn't give you a gratifying pump in the middle of the struggle. The actual structural growth of the neural pathways happens hours or days later, primarily during deep sleep and recovery.
So learning isn't a glamorous workout at the gym. It is physical therapy.
That is a much better analogy.
Because anyone who has done physical therapy knows it is awkward, it is profoundly uncomfortable, you feel incredibly fragile, and you don't see the mobility gains until long after the pain for session is over. You just have to trust the unseen mechanics.
And that framework changes everything. You learn to interpret the agitation and the cognitive fatigue not as a warning sign that you have hit your permanent limits, but as the physical sensation of your limits actively expanding.
It is a complete recalibration of how we experience friction. So let's distill the core takeaways for you to carry forward. First, audit your vocabulary. Swap out the identity labels for action verbs. Stop praising the innate genius and start praising the grit and the strategy.
Second, expect the P3 error wave. When you inevitably fail, acknowledge the emotional sting lighting up your anterior ACC, but immediately deploy your parallel cognitive resources.
Right.
Engage the dorsal ACC by asking, what is the structural mechanics of this mistake, and what is the strategy to correct it?
And finally, reframe your physical panic. A racing heart, sweaty palms, and pre-performance anxiety are not biological signs of impending failure. They are cardiovascular proof that your blood vessels are dilating and your body is mobilizing resources to help you execute.
Ultimately, the boundaries of our capabilities are largely determined by the narratives we maintain. The biology simply follows the belief.
Which brings us to a final thought for you to carry into your day. If the stories we tell ourselves about stress and intelligence can literally alter our stroke volume, dictate our peripheral blood flow, and physically rewire the geography of our neural pathways, physically rewire our neural pathways, how much of what you currently consider to be your permanent fixed personality or your natural limits is simply just a habit of storytelling that you haven't unlearned yet?